And now it's time for Onpoint, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. The mobile payment service arm of Kakao Corporation, Kakao Pay, makes its debut on South Korea's benchmark index, the KOSPI, in around an hour from now. Kakao, of course, is a household name here in South Korea, so naturally a lot of eyes are on Kakao Pay's upcoming market performance, and it doesn't end there either.
Yes, the corporation has hinted that Kakao Mobility and other Kakao affiliates are all set to be listed, perhaps by the end of this year. For a closer look and the IPO craze in Korea, we connect to Steven Borowiec, a journalist based in Seoul. Good morning, Steven.
Good morning.
Now, Steven, competition to get into this particular IPO was intense, and Kakao Pay set the IPO price at roughly $76 a share. Are the majority of market analysts expecting Kakao Pay to bolt out the gates when trading opens, and do they forecast upward momentum for a sustained period?
Investors will definitely see this as an attractive opportunity at the outset. If this 2021 has been a really unprecedented year on the Korean stock market in terms of IPOs, there's been a bunch of dynamite debuts that have attracted a lot of attention in the early stages. Even the FSS, the regulatory authority, has cautioned investors to not necessarily see these IPOs as a source of long-term growth. So I feel like the most likely scenario, just gauged on what I've been reading and people I've been talking to, is you'll probably see a flurry of activity around the Kakao Pay IPO in the early stages, and then at some point profit taking will take hold and investors will look to try to cash out, and maybe there will be a kind of dying down of the initial enthusiasm. But it remains to be seen how things will go going forward. I mean, as we know, Kakao and Naver and some of these other big tech companies are currently facing the prospect of tighter regulation from, not just the stock authorities, but on a legal basis more generally, as the government tries to kind of limit the number of new businesses they can go into to try to ensure fair competition. So the Kakao Pay debut will be an interesting kind of litmus test in that we'll be able to see that a stock that has a really high amount of early enthusiasm, it'll be interesting to see how it fares going forward. Probably it won't be able to sustain the initial fervor.
Yeah, it's hard to see it going down today, but of course I'm no financial advisor. But in terms of retail investors, especially those of us with lighter pockets, they kind of came across saying they liked the way Kakao Pay organized its IPO. Can you tell our viewers around the world who might not be aware of this why a lot of retail investors in South Korea were pretty happy with the way this particular IPO was structured?
Well, this was the first KOSPI IPO that went ahead using what they call the equal allocation system. And what that means is investors, as long as they're willing to make a kind of minimum deposit, it gives everybody an equal chance of getting in on this IPO. And so this means that bigger investors cannot just use their clout to buy up a larger portion of it, and they can't muscle out smaller pocketed investors. And this means that, as I think we'll get into later, over the past year or so, there's been a quite large growth in the number of retail investors in South Korea. There's been more people who are interested in this kind of thing, and their activity has increased quite drastically. And they have aired this grievance that when there are these attractive IPOs, they are, because of their smaller fund base, they're not as able to get in on the fund. And so regulators put forth this system, and a lot of people feel like this is more fair. It doesn't disadvantage smaller investors in the way that the previous system might have. So there will be a precedent set here, and it'll be interesting to see if this system can lead to a kind of more even or a wider distribution of funds, and more people being able to see retail investing as a profit gaining activity.
Mm-hmm. And Steven, we finally touched upon how Kakao Corporation likely has a number of other IPOs up its sleeve in the coming months. Tell us more about those and any other upcoming IPOs that are likely to cause a frenzy of excitement.
Kakao Mobility is one that I know the company is planning, and that one intersects quite directly with Kakao's ongoing exchanges with the government over the possibility of tighter regulation. Kakao Mobility is based in the taxi business, and as we've seen in the past, South Korea's taxi business has a pretty powerful lobby, a pretty powerful. They have the government's ear on a number of things because the taxi business employs a lot of people, and they have been pretty resistant to new and innovative encroachments on their territory. We've seen, like there was the case of Tada last year, where the government stepped in and deemed this service illegal as it was encroaching on the traditional taxi business. And so before going ahead with that IPO, Kakao Mobility is kind of drawing back the scope of its business. I think they've had to withdraw one feature that allowed like customers to pay a little bit more and get a premium taxi or a quicker taxi. And so they're having to put forth a sort of pared down and a narrower range of businesses that they say they're going to enter. And perhaps in response to that, Kakao, when it comes to Kakao Pay and Kakao Mobility, they've talked more about branching over into overseas markets as a potential source of growth. I mean, that might be a way of showing investors that even though to some extent the writing is on the wall for these companies' expansion at home because the regulators see them as a threat to street-level businesses, they could possibly be able to convince investors that their growth prospects are stronger because they plan to move into other countries where they don't, as of yet, don't have a foothold. But other than that, I think LG Chemical's spinoff has an IPO coming. I'm sure there will be more excitement on this front.
Well, certainly anything with Kakao's name attached to it will almost certainly do very well because it's such a well-known brand name here in South Korea. Steven, wonderful job as always. Pleasure speaking with you. That was Steven Borowiec on the market debut that's coming up very shortly of Kakao Pay and the IPO mania gripping South Korea. Thank you very much.
Thank you.